Welcome to Marriage, Let's Talk, hosted by legendary worldwide marriage encounter leader, Father Rosy Rosebrough, featuring Catholic married couples from around the world who demonstrate healthy communication for building better marriages. And now, here's Father Rosy.
Hi, Father Rosy here. I'm glad you could join us today. This podcast is not talking about marriage. It is where we're going to share how to create a better marriage through communicating feelings in authentic ways. I'm introducing a couple. Their names are Michelle and Chris Seaman, and they'll have a certain topic they're going to choose. Tonight's going to be forgiveness, by the way. They've written love letters to each other, describing their feelings in various manners. Then we'll pick one of their feelings to attempt to try to experience the other person's feeling, to draw closer to them. Going back and forth is what we call the dialogue. Sharing one's feelings and exploring them is one of the most intimate ways to communicate with your loved one. Tonight we have Michelle and Chris once more. Introduce yourselves and go from there.
I'm Michelle.
And I'm not. I'm Chris.
And we came up with this question today. Our question was, am I willing to ask forgiveness for someone from someone other than you? How do I feel sharing this with you now? And we came up with this question because we have been workshopping a first set couple and a third set couple. So as we went into the mentality and really supporting these couples in their writing and their journey, the mentality reminds us that living the concept means both in and out of dialogue. So when we looked at that, and then we said acceptance means we embrace both the feeling and the person who is having the feeling. It, like, both of us were struck by this idea that it is us, absolutely, and it's then beyond us, right? And
that is for the people who do not know what you're talking about. The couples who are a team have a background, a mentality for us to kind of focus on our talk to make sure we're on target and not lost, and discussing that. And meanwhile, something that you know already intellectually, but we forget at times, Jesus says, love one another as I love you. And sometimes we limit ourselves to, I'll treat my spouse in this manner, but I don't necessarily carry it outside the home. And you're talking about carrying outside the home.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah.
And kids would call us hypocrites if they catch us in that. And they're not afraid to tell us that. Mommy and Daddy, you do that. How can you do that with them and not do it with yourself? You know? So, okay. That gives a background.
So, yeah, that was the, as whenever we're working with another couple, we typically want to immerse ourselves back into the mentality before we sit with the other couple and workshop, go through it. And both of us were like, oh, how often do we need to remind ourselves that it is here and it is here, that we, like you just said, Father Rosy, offering forgiveness to our daughter, offering forgiveness to my mother beyond our relationship that also supports and grows our relationship. So just wanted to kind of, as you hear mine, you'll be like, what, Michelle? I said, my love, a quality of yours I found most endearing was your patience while waiting for me to get my hair done. Something you do that I truly value is make chili for my entire work potluck today. Thank you. Remember when we first brought our little pug home and I carried him in my overalls pocket? That was a long time ago. This question, why did we decide on it? I think sometimes I find it easier to ask forgiveness from others than I do asking forgiveness from you. I know it's a me issue, but I try really hard to do right by and for you. So when I mess up with you, I judge myself harsher and maybe have a harder time forgiving myself to then seek forgiveness from you. I feel embarrassed sharing this with you now. Embarrassed tastes like those 2 salty mashed potatoes that I served on our first Thanksgiving that everybody choked down. Embarrassed smells like when I try on a new perfume at a store and I quickly change the scent from whatever it is to ode to a litter box because of how my body is made up. And it is bad. Embarrassed is the red of my face when Taryn asked me a question about sex when she was little. A previous experience of my embarrassed feeling was when our neighbor went to the movies with us, and I said that I would want that handsome actor playing, a person in the movie if I looked like that. It was based on a real life. And our neighbor said, "Wow, Michelle, I think you missed the point of the movie. I love you always, me."
Dear my love, your MEQ is dealing with my sometimes crazy schedule and customers. Remember when I had a hotel room for that one job in Phoenix for like a month? Yes, I'm willing to ask others, but I'm not so eager or quick to do it. You are the priority for me. I feel honest about this. Honest tastes like food that we cook at home. Honest smells like the clean air at the top of Mount Lemon. Honest is the black of a judge's robe. Honest is our dog's reactions when we come home or when we give them a treat. Honest is seeking advice from a trusted friend. Honest is not how I view the thoughts of a talk show host or most politicians. Honest in song is I Honestly Love You by Olivia Newton-John. Love forever, Chris.
So what we noticed about ourselves was giving it a number. Chris tended to lowball a number so that we always, and I can speak in absolutes because it happened for a very long time, always dialogued on my feeling. However, I'm reading mine and listening to yours. I'm wondering, where do you think that we should dialogue? Which
your descriptions seem a little more intense than my descriptions, so I think I'd like to talk about your embarrassed feeling a little more, if that's okay with you.
I just can't wait. Yep.
Okay. So we, like you said, we don't give numbers, but if you were to give it a number on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate it?
I think it would be on the higher end of the scale, maybe more 7 or 8.
Okay. So kind of strong. You talked about the salty mashed potatoes. Is there another embarrassed time or food that served that was embarrassing?
So there was the time that we went to that couple's house for New Year's Day. And the food that she served, it was intended to be cold, but I didn't realize that it was intended to be cold. And I've never had cold mashed potatoes before. Wow, it must be mashed potato thing, but I've never had cold mashed potatoes. I don't know that that was as intense because I think I was feeling embarrassed for her because I was like, just eat it, babe, right? And then her husband clarified to us that, oh, these are always served cold. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I was thinking the same thing. I was more embarrassed for them just because I didn't know.
But I think that's the only other like taste
Okay.
I could think of.
Doesn't really help me much.
Sorry.
I totally get the perfume thing. We talk about that a lot. What about a time that we were on a trip or something happened that you were embarrassed that I could kind of maybe relate to?
So look, I can't even say it out. So I know that when we went on that cruise and I walked into the sauna because I was very, very cold, and I was like fully dressed head to toe, had my jacket zipped up, and then there were the two women in there that were very much not dressed. That I felt embarrassed in that situation. Then the fact that I sat in there for 15-20 minutes just dying because they didn't leave, and I didn't want them to think that I was leaving because of that, like a whole story I had in my head. But I that was probably a 9 or a 10 on the scale of embarrassed.
And I would think that would be higher than a 7 or 8.
I can think of another embarrassed was when I thought I was being so helpful when we went to Disney World, and I threw everybody's laundry in the washing machine. I mean, I sorted it, of course, but I threw everybody's laundry in the washing machine to be very helpful, and went and joined you guys out at the pool. And you said, "What took you so long?" And I was like, "Oh, I started a load of laundry." And you turned it like just that white as a ghost. "You did what?" And when I realized that the Disney World tickets were in your pocket and they got washed, I, again, probably a higher rating than the 7 or 8.
That wasn't an embarrassed feeling for me. That was a very very upset feeling. Yes.
Upset, yeah.
Let's see. What about when we were living with your mom and dad? We're waiting for our house to get ready, and you were at work and I was at home, and I gave the dogs a bath, and then learned later that I did it wrong because I did it in the bathtub and I didn't put anything protective down instead of doing it outside. I broke their rules, and I was pretty embarrassed about that because that's not how we do things.
I remember the story from both sides, my mom and dad's and yours, and feeling embarrassed again for you. But maybe I'm thinking of when my mom said, "Well, don't you use a different cutting board for meat and cheese? How could you use the same cutting board?" And so I felt probably a 7 or an 8 embarrassment again in that moment that she was immediately so judgy. And yes, we use different cutting boards. But it just the judgment or how harsh it came was embarrassing.
What about, so there was a time when I went on a golf trip with my buddies, and we drove to the golf course, which was like 45 minutes from the house. And when we got there, I had left my golf shoes at the house. So I had to so I'm an idiot. I left my one thing I need, and I had to go back and get my shoes and come back. And I barely made it in time.
So knowing how much you love golf and hate being wrong or the cause of any kind of disruptance in a plan, I judged that was a stronger embarrassed feeling than my 7 or 8.
Okay.
And you don't usually venture into the 9 or 10 range, but just I'm guessing that might be a little bit stronger.
Okay. What about if it was on a table, what would your embarrassed feeling say?
It's embarrassing.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. I think that, do you remember when we went to Las Vegas and we got in the elevator? Taryn had a cheer competition. We got in the elevator and everybody was facing like the normal way. And I got in the elevator and I faced everybody in the elevator. And as the elevator doors closed, I was like, I guess you're wondering why I called you all here. And Taryn was like, oh my gosh, Mom. Right. And then like hours later, she was like, do you remember when you embarrassed me? And we were both of us talking about it later, that was like a 7 or an 8 on the level of embarrassment factors of parents, right? That, and then like a year later, you did something similar on the elevator when we were at the Embassy Suites, and you were like, they serve breakfast, right? And that lady was telling you, and again, she was like, and we said, okay, so maybe that moves up in the scale. Like I think of the times as a child, right, that my parents embarrassed me and that we would talk about it later, especially as we started thinking about feelings and her saying how embarrassed she was. And we were like, oh, that's lower in the scale of things.
I think I got it. Remember when my mom came to visit us in Oklahoma and we went out to eat and we left the restaurant and Mom walked out the restaurant with a stack of napkins like this high in her hands. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, you can buy them. You have to steal them from the restaurant. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. And I mean, again, I think you're very close. Again, though, I felt embarrassed for her. I wasn't exactly embarrassed because you know how many napkins I walk out of a restaurant with, but I think you're pretty close. I'm trying to think.
What about when Taryn saw the cross-dresser in Vegas and said very loudly that that woman forgot to shave their legs? And we were like, shut your mouth and keep walking.
Yeah. That was about a 7 or an 8 initially, right? Like when she first said it. And then when she kept repeating it, like, Mom, something's wrong with that lady. Mom, something's wrong with that lady. Then the intensity kept growing because we were like, stop, just stop talking. We'll tell you in a minute, stop talking. But I think initially when she was like, Mom, something's wrong with that lady. She forgot to shave her legs. And both of us were like, uh-oh, right? That was about a 7 or an 8. That in me, yes, I think you're experiencing my embarrassed feeling.
Thank you very much for opening your heart there. That is just very powerful. And again, it's yes, your feeling of embarrassment is very much noted, and so I love the examples. You probably have part of a storybook there for what not to say and say all the times, but those are normal things that happen all the time, and many times we laugh about them later, but at the moment we feel helpless and our faces turn red, and sometimes more red, and sometimes we're lost for words. And hopefully don't say unkind things in that middle of time, but most of the time we just get very embarrassed. I remember a time when I was celebrating Mass, and I thought I gave a beautiful homily, and when I came to the to the consecration, that's where I started, not at the preface. I was so excited. I turned the page, and 2 pages came with instead of 1. And I get to the great Amen, and I go, through him, with him, and in him, at the last end, and nobody in the whole church responded. And all of a sudden, this gal said, Father Rosy, you forgot the consecration. You started that. You forgot the beginning. I turned, but they were so beautiful. And then when I after mass, I apologized to people then. I said, wait, we'll start back over again. And the gal told me so beautifully, he said, it was Monica, Monica was her name, and Monica Pazia. And she said to me, it's not because he was so cool, because he knows we love him and accept him with embarrassment. And that was really touched me, that even with my embarrassment, they didn't make fun of me or, gotcha. So so embarrassment can be a tool of understanding or grasping that the spouse still loves you, even your mother still loves you.
I think it's sometimes in the fun feelings, the feelings of excitement, the feelings of joy, those ones, like we could probably rock, paper, scissors and see who talks about it. I judge that when I have those stronger reactions like this, and it's typically to a more uncomfortable feeling. And as I was writing my letter, we can sometimes go to like the easier, like, I feel fine sharing this with you now, right? But he knows me better than that. And I do feel embarrassed. And as I was writing it, I was like, oh, I know we're going to talk about my feeling.
Well, usually when I write the letter, that gives me permission to talk about it. If I don't write it, I have a harder time talking about it. Is that the same way with you?
Mm-hmm.
Almost like it gives us an introduction.
Yeah, it gives you a little what's the word I'm looking for? It opens a door.
Right.
It starts the conversation instead of, putting it off and then it just goes into a bigger issue later. Now you can at least have that door open and talk about it a little bit.
Yes, I used to do that with my spiritual director. I could always write it down, and then once I wrote it down and gave it to him, I could talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same kind of that's where the gift of writing frees us up and not put us on the spot to bring up a topic that may not be the easiest to talk about. I'm so grateful for the guests we had today who shared willingly themselves in their dialogue. And thank you for joining us. I look forward to the next episode when I join you again once more.
This has been Marriage, Let's Talk, sponsored by Worldwide Marriage Encounter, the foremost faith-inspired marriage enrichment organization in the world, providing married couples with transformative experiences through couples retreats, small groups, and more. Learn to nurture love in your marriage at wwme.org. Marriage, Let's Talk is a production of Mater Media, the apostolate that offers the Celebrate Catholic Marriage experience to energize and fortify married couples through parish events and the 7-step journey to joy. Find out more at matermedia.org.